What's up, everybody? Metal Dave, along with my co-host Jason McMaster, bringing you another episode of the Talk Louder podcast. Today, we are joined by Carl Canedy, the drummer from the Rhoads, a longtime New York heavy metal band. A great storied history they have. They have a new album out. It's their 10th one. It's called Rattle the Cage. And Carl also has a book that just came out called Tales of a Wild Dog. And so we get to talk to him a little bit about the making of that book, the new album from the Rhoads, and of course his past history. And I think we all owe a debt of gratitude to Carl for his production work. Jason, I don't have to tell you where this guy, made his mark in the world of production. Some of our favorite bands.
Yeah, his involvement with Johnny and Marcia Zazula at Megaforce Records and the onset of the earliest inceptions of thrash music, mainly on the East Coast, but getting on the map with, of course, Kill 'Em All by Metallica. Carl Canedy came in a little bit later as far as like a name that you read on records as engineer and producer, of course with Anthrax, as well as more and more and more. But Overkill, all the early Anthrax records, Among the Living, Carl was there. He was the one helping put the songs together and helping put those bands' ideas into putting them on the rails for the right direction. That he was communicative with those bands and their songs early years, and a debt of gratitude. He's so humble, he will not take that debt of gratitude. He was True. Yeah. Does not wear that hat at all. Very, very humble. His book will be hopefully a tell-all. Where did he say you could get that? What's it called?
Anywhere you can buy books, Amazon.com, BarnesandNobles.com. You could just Google it, I'm sure. And he leaves us a website in this episode where you can get an autographed copy of it.
Yeah.
I don't remember it off the top of my head, but stay tuned and listen, pay attention during the episode.
The book is called
Tales of a Wild Dog.
That's right. Tales of a Wild Dog.
Yeah. And a lot of great stories related to the book. We talk about the new Rhoads album and the production credits, just to kind of piggyback on what you were saying. He did the first 3 releases from Anthrax. He did Overkill's Field of Fire. He worked with Possessed.
Violence and Force, Exciter.
He did Exciter's Violence and Force, one of my favorite records of that type of music. And we got to talk to him a little bit about that and how those sessions went. So a lot of good information. And as you said, I tried to push some credit on him and call him like one of the architects of what became thrash metal. And as you said, he's very humble. Just sort of shrugged it off. I might have even embarrassed him a little bit.
Oh, I don't think you embarrassed him. I think that you just get into how he is as a person and psyche, and he's proud, obviously, because he's got all of his work displayed in his studio, but at the same time, he's not. He's happy. He's happy that he got to do that, but he doesn't wear it on his head and say, "Hey, look at me." He's right. I thoroughly enjoy talking to him. He seems like a very down to earth, superhuman kind of buddy.
So, yeah, great drummer too.
Yeah, I know, right? And still relevant in my eyes. Yeah, Rhoads have a new record out. What's that called?
Rattle the Cage.
That's right.
The new album from the Rhoads. We didn't get to talk to him because we lost him there, but I do believe there's a tour to support that record. So be on the lookout for the Rhoads tour dates upcoming. And of course, his book, Tales of a Wild Dog. So yeah, real pleasure. The guy is not a glory seeker at all, but he sure has a lot to his credit. And he was happy to share some of it with us today. We were grateful to have him. Carl Canedy today on the Talk Louder podcast.
There we go.
Hey,
I
there's the
love
good
Texas. Are you guys staying safe? It's been brutal out there.
man.
Uh,
Yeah, we've been
yeah, the
okay here.
we're in Austin, and the weather
Oh, okay.
is Houston got hammered and no
Right.
power, and yeah, it's fucked up.
I remember driving in Houston one time. I was visiting a friend, and I said, "Oh, I can go to the mall or wherever I was going." And on the way back, the rain was so heavy, I couldn't see. It was thunderously loud, and I couldn't see. I couldn't pull over. I couldn't continue on. It was horrible. I couldn't
Yep,
believe how bad it was. Never been in a rain like that.
it
And
gets
then it
like
was
a
over in 5 or 6 minutes.
yeah,
Yeah, and then the sun came out, right?
yeah.
Uh-huh. Was
That's
crazy.
Texas.
Carl, this is David Glessner,
Hey, Carl.
Hey,
and
David. Nice to
How are
meet
you?
you.
we're
Yeah,
excited
nice to meet you. You won't
excited to
remember
talk to you. Yeah.
you won't remember this, but I met you in Austin at South by Southwest one year. You
Oh,
were
yeah.
hanging out with a mutual friend of ours, Ida Langsam.
Oh, yeah. I
You
love
remember
Ida.
that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
How's Ida doing?
She's doing well. I haven't talked to her in a while personally. We're friends on Facebook and we keep up with each other, but I think that's probably the last time I saw her in person. I don't know if that was
Mhm.
20 years ago or something.
That was a long time ago.
But I remember her, she was in town and she said, "Hey, let's meet up." And she goes, "By the way, I'll have this friend with me, Carl Kennedy." And I said, "I know that guy. He plays for the Rods." And then when I met you, she introduced me to you and I said, "Yeah, I'm familiar with you. You know, I know your work with the Rods and your production credits and everything." And I think you were kind of surprised that anybody knew who you were.
I was. Yeah. I'm always surprised. That
But
hasn't changed.
it was great meeting you then and great having you today. So
Well, thanks.
you've got a lot going on right now. Let's talk about, first of all, your book. You've got a book out called Tales of a Wild Dog.
Mhm.
And tell us a little bit about that. I understand it's, writing a book is obviously a daunting task, but I heard that your daughter was sort of your motivation for doing this. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. My daughter, she would always say, "Dad, whenever you talk about your childhood, the stories are always so sad." And I was like, I don't want her to, for me to die and her be left with that impression. So that's what made me think she should have kind of the whole story. And so along the way, there were a lot of journalists who would always say, "You need to write a book." When I would do interviews, like, "Oh my God, you have so many stories." So eventually I was going to do it with a Russian journalist who had done a 4-page spread on me. But we decided that the language barrier, he spoke English well, but writing a book and then the time difference, we're like, it's going to be too much. So then Doc Harrington contacted me and he said, "I'll transcribe your audio files." I'm like, "Great, that's the best." So this way I can do my audio files. If the book never came out, my daughter would have all the audio files, which she does. And that's mission accomplished. I mean, I didn't think I'd sell 50 books, quite honestly. But then as time went on, we wound up with New Haven Publishing signed us up and I was thrilled. And but I really didn't think it would do well. And I thought, but it's debuted. My publisher sent me an email. I woke up and she said, "Congratulations, you're debuted at #1 on Amazon." And
All right.
I had tears in my eyes. I was like, "You got to be kidding me." Because seriously, I didn't think anybody would buy my book. I didn't think anybody cared about any of my stories, but I wanted to do it so my daughter had it as her legacy and for my granddaughter. But I thought it would take 2 months. Like you said, a daunting task to do a book.
Hmm.
And excuse me, without doubt, I totally agree with that. I thought it would be 2 months. Phil's like, "Yeah, I'll transcribe." So I thought, I've got my phone. I'd lie down on the floor sometimes or in a car. I would just think of a story and I'd think of a chapter that I wanted to tell a story about. And I would dictate it. And I thought, 2 months max, I'll be done with this thing. This is going to be a breeze. Just sit and say a couple things and, tell my story. And it took 2 years.
Yeah.
Oh my God. And twice along the way, Doc had to talk me off the ledge because even though he was transcribing, sometimes he would use transcription software. So suddenly he became she, vice versa.
Mm.
Places were out of sync, chronologically. Um, and after a while, I sat at an Indian restaurant that had just opened. I thought, well, I'll get some chicken tikka and I'll sit here with 100 pages I printed out. And I'll just make some of the corrections and we'll get this sorted out. An hour later, I had maybe gone 5 pages and I hated my chicken tikka. It's a new restaurant. I don't like garlic. So, okay. That was a bad experience. And I didn't get anywhere in the book. And I was like, I don't want to release this. If it's not in my words, I don't want it out. It makes no sense for me. That's not why I'm doing it. And I don't want some story out that my daughter will have that she can read and go, well, did that happen? No, it didn't happen that way.
Yeah.
So I was ready to pull the plug twice. And eventually we sorted it out. And then we get to the end and the publisher says, it's almost 500 pages. We've got to cut 200 pages.
Mm.
So I was like, oh my God. So that was another 6 months between cutting it and then re-editing it and blah, blah, blah. So it was really trying. And twice I almost pulled the plug because bottom line for me was my audio files were done. So I'd accomplished my goal.
Yeah.
And I figured, if I don't sell those 50 copies, then so be it. So
well, we're glad you didn't pull the plug. As a journalist myself, I can understand your pain. That's why I knew going into this that it was, writing a book is always a daunting task. I've never done it myself. But I can always appreciate someone who does because I have a sense of the effort and time. And as you said, the rewrites and the editing. And just when you think it's done, you got to, there's more.
I mean, you do it. If you're a journalist, you do it all the time. But
yeah,
when it's this situation where I wanted it to be my words, the way I speak. At one point we joke about it now, but it was not funny. I read something that said copious tears. And I went, when the freak in my life have I ever said copious tears? Now, I certainly know the word copious, but I've never used it in that context. So there were some tough moments, but Phil was great.
Welcome to AI.
Yeah.
It's okay that, they're using software to help you get a job done. But when it's putting words in your mouth or not exactly what you're trying to say, it's creating more work for you, and it turns into basically not you. It's
not you.
It's not you. It's your intellectual property and your life, and your stories are not. You're not done, Carl. You're not done telling your stories. I'm not saying you need to go through hell again and write a second book or anything, but. That this is why I feel like we are, let's digitize everything. Music is streaming, blah, da, 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 da. It's basically killing off the ritual of art. So I'm glad that
I agree with that in a lot of ways. Absolutely. Yeah. I think I see it with young people though. And I see it with like blues aficionados and so on. They love, and country fans and rock and metal fans. They love seeing a band live. Now there's definitely in the pop world, there's a lot of deception in terms of, are they actually singing or not? I've even seen when I went to see, I don't know if I should even say his name, but he's a movie director and has a very successful band. And my friend managed them and I went to see them. And I noticed that the guitarist is sustaining this high note and the note's ringing out. And suddenly he's at the bottom of the neck, but that note is still being sustained. And I see the bass player and I see the bass part start up. The bass player's not playing his bass part. And I said, what's up? And he said, I would be embarrassed to tell you how much of that show is pre-recorded.
Wow. Yeah.
So, but anyway, but there are a lot of fans who really love that whole synergy of musicians playing together and what comes with that. And for me, I'll take somebody out of breath. That's why I admire Pink so much, because she does it. And I don't know how she does it as well as she does, but she's amazing. That core strength she has being a gymnast, but she's a great singer and she does it live and there's no trickery. And, I'd much rather have that even if they're off, they're out of tune, they're out of breath, then hearing somebody who's perfect voice, or are they singing with the track? Do they have a vocal track in there and they're just kind of singing in? And I just heard recently that one of my big heroes, and this I've heard this before, but he was on tour with them, and he said, because I first started, he said I walked backstage, and there's this young guy singing all the songs live behind the stage for a major player. But I know he can't hit those notes anymore, but it's still, it's kind of like, yeah, I'd rather hear him croak out the song than cheating everybody that way. But I guess it's not. As long as you're entertained, that's what it is. It's entertainment.
Yeah, I think that especially holds true with rock and metal because one of the reasons, part of the appeal is the energy of the music. And for me, anyway, in the crowd, I would rather see somebody giving it their all and maybe not hitting the notes like they did on the record, but at least they're going for it and they're giving me that energy. And that's kind of what brought me into the music in the first place, was just sort of
that live experience, right?
Yeah.
I agree. Someone just told me with Shinedown, this thing with the mic goes up,
Mm-hmm.
And I said, what's that all about? And he said, because they're vocal tracks. So he's singing along, but when it's the other, he just goes up so you don't hear his voice. I'm like, is that true? He goes, yeah, he was a sound guy. He goes, yeah, that's the deal. Whether that's, I don't want to spread rumors because I love Shinedown, but I've always thought that was a very odd thing that you're singing along. Suddenly you move the mic up here and you're still hearing your vocal, but live.
Yeah.
Well, that also means that they're using in-ears and they're running basically a click track, and they're following through
absolutely
reference tracks, we will call them. And
that's very kind.
I'm not, I'm not totally against reference tracks, as long as they're not doing all the work. If they're helping the band hold on to tempo and pitch and things like that, as long as they're performing, I don't mind that. It's when the instrumentation is actually fake.
And I totally agree with that. And I've heard those, and I've talked to my friends who have them, who use them. But it's first chorus in 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm good with that. You're playing to a click track, and you're getting a guide vocal, a reference vocal that gives you, like, because sometimes it's chaotic, and so you don't want to go off derail the train. So that's cool. That's a guide. It's a helpful tool as I see it. But yeah, when somebody's playing your parts, then pre-recorded parts or vocals, then I think that's a little. But again, a lot of people don't care.
Right?
And,
they don't.
And a lot of people don't care that some bands are out there who have no original members, and or somebody who was like second and third generation to an original member, and people are totally fine with seeing the band. Basically, they become a tribute band, and but some of them are great.
Yeah. So I'll agree. There's one thing that I notice that I'll throw it on the table. We can talk about it or move on. Is kids, when you go see a band and you don't hear the drummer count off the song, that's when you got to question it. When the band just goes bang into the song and there's no, all right, 1, 2, or whatever,
Yeah.
You hear Lars count off their songs. You hear him count off their songs. That is awesome. When you go see another band and you just like the band just all of a sudden bangs in together, that means
explodes into the music with no count off.
That means there's a reference track and they're following a click track again, which is fine as long as you hear cabinets blowing music in your face when you're in the first few rows. That's when you know the band is really live.
Yeah, I love that about Metallica, that they've kept it real. Warts and all.
Yeah,
totally cool. I'm totally good with that. Because when they catch fire, it's awesome.
Oh yeah.
And that's what you really want.
They've always been honest, and they've always been had the ability to own something that resembles a mistake, and they shrug things off in the right way. And it's not just Metallica. There's a lot of hard rock and metal acts out there that have that mentality, thank God. and
I agree.
fantastic.
Yeah.
I'm looking at your me and Dave also have what I call the landfill, the future things that will end up in the landfill as our backdrop. And I'm looking at yours, and that's half my record collection.
Yeah. Oh man.
Oh, there's the rest of my record collection. Okay.
Yeah. For people
Nice.
listening and
Yeah.
not
And then over
watching.
here we have more, and then I have. Let me just show you.
Yeah,
I
show
have
us.
two new albums that I have not been able to put up. But if you see here, all of this,
Oh, you've got a lot of, yeah.
and I have more CDs to put in frames. They go all the way down, as you can see.
Yeah.
So I have all of this and whatever, but
For people
I have more.
listening and not watching, where Carl is showing us his wall of death.
Framed
And
records.
Yeah.
I call it the wall of shame.
Oh,
But whatever
shit.
you want to call it, it's fine.
Yeah.
There's some good stuff up there.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
So anyway, and I have more to put up. I'm going to this other wall now to the left of this, so I'm going to strip that one. And start
it's
there.
90% of that is let's call it your body of work.
Yeah.
Absolutely, it's all something I produced or performed on.
Mm-hmm. Excellent.
Let me get back to the book real quick. Tales of a Wild Dog. Now, obviously, it's your book, but you had a lot of guest people comment in the book. You had people lending their commentary, their stories, or their perspective on your story. You've got guys from Anthrax, Exciter, Manowar, Hellstar from here in Texas, Billy Sheehan, Mark Tornillo, Possessed. Of all those people that had input into your book, did anybody's input surprise you?
Well, that's a really good question, and it's probably not a short answer, but I'll attempt to make it short. So this started with Phil and I were talking, Doc and I were talking about, maybe we should get a commentary from like one person. And so that's how it started. And then I said, he said, we could ask more people. And I said, that's fine. I think the premise is going to be, they can say anything they want. They can talk shit about me. They can say whatever they want, whatever their truth is, however they see it. I always loved the Mick Jagger, Keith Richards thing when Mick would go, yeah, like we're doing this over here and that was fantastic. And then Keith's like, yeah, well, we never did that, mate. And it totally contradicts the two stories. And I thought, I always loved that.
Yeah.
And so I was like, you know what? That's the gist of it. We won't edit. We'll tell everybody that they can say what they want. They don't have to be kind. They can, if they have a beef, they can say whatever they want, and we'll print it. We won't edit a word. So to that end, I haven't read everything because I didn't want it to affect me when I was editing the book, where I would go, oh, wait a minute, that guy's talking shit that I don't like. That's out. I didn't want to tempt myself with breaking my own rule. So I didn't. So I just read yesterday, because I'm doing my audiobook, and I just read what Jeff Plate wrote, and it touched me so much. I hadn't read it. And I was like, I have to call him, because I was just very, very touched how beautiful what he had to say was, and how I was an influence on him. And he's always so kind to use me as that, like Carl was a huge influence on me, but it was really touching to read that. So I have not read all of it. And so I don't know what kind of shit people are talking.
You'll be surprised when you find out, I guess. Yeah.
That's called love, Carl. It's called love, man.
Yeah. Yeah. And you say in the press release that came with the book, something to the effect of, I won't quote you directly, but let me paraphrase. You said there were some portions of the book that were very difficult for you to relive. And I guess if you're going to be honest and write a book, that's always sort of the challenge, Where do you draw the line? How much is too much? Do you just throw it all on the table? Can you tell us a little bit or elaborate a little bit on some of the parts that you found really difficult to relive?
Well, the early childhood, was really difficult. And it's something that my whole life I've had to deal with certain pieces. And sometimes I would hear from my relative, my Aunt Irene told me some things before she died. And this was maybe 10 years ago or so. That put things in perspective and put things in place that I'd carried with me all these years from childhood that I knew, but she confirmed them. And that was huge for me. But talking about that, there were times when, and I remember one time where I was recounting a story and I'm lying on the floor because sometimes I would just lie on the floor. I don't know why. I normally never ever lie on the floor. But I'm lying on the floor and I'm telling a story and I just started crying. It was just very emotional for me. And so those parts were really difficult. And I'm coming up to that now in my audiobook and I'm just basically dreading it. Once I'm past my childhood and those things, then it's clear sailing for me because I'm not emotionally invested. I told my story, so I don't have an issue telling that. And then reading with other people, I'm going to have other people read that. So I won't even be reading that. So, but the early childhood was really difficult to relive. And there were a lot of things I left out because I heard from a couple people who read parts of it. Now, Doc's wife read it and she said, I was crying when I read some of that stuff. So I knew it was emotional. I thought, you know what, there's enough in there. And as you mentioned, what do you leave in? What do you leave out? I put enough in so that people get the gist of how my early childhood was. And that was, good enough.
Yeah. You mentioned the audiobook. So how do you handle, say, for example, Joey Belladonna when he's speaking? I can't imagine you're going to get all these people to contribute to the audiobook. So how do you record those voices? Do you read their words or do you have someone else read their words? I'm just curious how that works.
People are really busy. So we're going to have a couple of people in who will read, female, male, and they'll read those parts. And we'll make it clear in the audio that, this is so-and-so reading this part. So it'll be clear in the audiobook.
Right. Okay.
And and I'm not a bad reader, but it was like, was a little bit, you want every word to be perfect and you want to have some kind of inflection instead of, and so then we went, I don't want to people listen to that because I wouldn't want to. So it's been challenging, a whole different thing. This is a new world. I've made so many albums and so many recordings and gone through the whole process from beginning to end. And, it's second nature to me. But a book, this is brand new. For you, it wouldn't be because you're a journalist. But for me, it's like, what the hell? What's going on here? I have to research it and I have to figure out. And then, of course, you have to execute it. Like I've never read an audiobook before.
Right. Yeah. Wow. Interesting. Whole new world of challenges there. Where is your book available? Where can people buy Tales of a Wild Dog?
Amazon.com and BarnesandNoble.com. And of course, there are a couple links. I know there's one for Europe, and I don't have that off the top of my head. Australia, I know that. But what the publisher is saying that anywhere you buy your books, they're available 43,000 places or something. But anywhere you buy books online, you can find the book. So
okay. Great. Yeah.
And the other is I have limited copies, so people can PayPal cmsmgmt@aol.com, and I'll be glad to send you an autographed copy.
Wow. There you go, fans.
Nice.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to getting into it. I have the electronic copy, and I'm very much a hard copy kind of guy. So I don't do digital reading as much as I like turning pages. So, but your story, I'm familiar with your background. I'm not familiar with your childhood and your personal life and that sort of thing. So I'm sure it's a great read. And as you said in the beginning, you've been doing this for a long time, and a lot of people have told you you've got some incredible stories. So to have them compiled in one collection is something I would look forward to reading. So Tales of a Wild Dog, people, check it out wherever you can get your books. Let's talk about the Rhoads. You got a new album.
Rattle the Cage.
Rattle the Cage.
Mm-hmm.
What is it? 10th album now?
I never count. So yeah, you tell me.
Yeah. I think it's your 10th album. And you've got some new blood in the band, I think. Is your bass player relatively new?
He is. Freddie Villano is played with Quiet Riot and Dee Snider's Widowmaker. Best change could have happened. Like I call us the Thunder Twins, the two of us, because he and I work out parts and we play. It's so tight and it's so powerful. His bass sound is, to me, it's reminiscent of Geezer, like a heavy bass sound with a bright, heavy bottom with a bright top. And he's a great guy and he contributes so much and he looks great with rock. And it's definitely been something that's been a huge addition. And I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled to work with him. And as our tour manager said to someone, they said, "What's it?" Freddie is significantly younger than we are. And so someone said, "What difference, has it made in the band having Freddie join?"
Yeah.
And she said, when you have two older cats in the house and you bring in a kitten, that's what happens.
Wow.
Re-energizes the two old cats.
Yeah.
Which is exactly what happened.
Yeah. Rattle the Cage is the title of the new album. I saw a video for the title track, and I also saw a video for a song called Shockwave.
Mm-hmm.
And Shockwave, the drumming on that song, that's a pretty good workout. So how do you stay fit or in shape? Do you play every day? What's your routine?
I feel guilty every day when I don't.
Okay.
I've always been like that. I used to play 7 days a week, practice or do something. I use my weights. I try to exercise. I do practice as much as I can. I'm always trying to learn things. Not easy teaching an old dog new tricks, but I've learned some new tricks. And that, you got to keep it fresh when you're recording. Otherwise, we joke about my lick. Got to play my lick on everything, my one lick I know. But yeah, you have to try to keep it fresh. So yeah, I do practice, and I, overall, we play, and I'm done, and I'm fine. Not out of breath, not stressed, not tired.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I heard the drumming on. I heard the drumming on.
So as long as I can knock on wood, as long as I can keep going at this place, as long as I can play comfortably at a level that I feel that I want to be at.
Yeah.
Where I want to be, then that's great. Once I get to the point where it's not really up to my standards because I'm a perfectionist and nothing I ever play is good enough. So once I get to a point where nothing is even close to good enough, then maybe it's time to hang it up.
Yeah.
And,
well, judging by the playing on Shockwave, I think you're a long way from hanging it up because that's a pretty good workout. I know. I think you'd be the first to admit we're no spring chickens here, and that's a young man's sound playing right there. That's some pretty.
Well,
good.
Thank you. Very kind words. Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing. I'm able to play the stamina endurance I have at 71, and I can't believe I'm saying 71 because I used to think 30 was old.
Yeah,
we all did.
I thought 30 was like, holy cow, man, those guys, they got to retire.
Yeah.
Sorry, this is kind of all over the place here, but I want to go back to a humble beginning. And I know you said your younger years were rough, but at some point you heard something on the radio, or a brother or an uncle or a cousin or a sister or the babysitter or somebody played you a record, a DJ, whatever, and you said, your tiny little Carl self said, "Oh my God, what is that? I have to do that." What made you become a drummer? What made you feel like you wanted to learn how to write songs? What got you? What caught you? What was attractive? What were you attracted to musically, sonically, when in your youngest memory?
That's a great question. That covers a lot of things that I didn't really cover. And now looking back, that's the other thing. The perspective from looking back. Once you've written something, and then you look back at it, now you can be objective when you've totally been subjective through the whole process. But now you can look back objectively and you see things differently from the other side. So what was amazing to me was my mother took me, I think it was at 4.5 or 5 years old, to VFW, and I remember the tank, which is still there, I've been told,
Wow.
in front of some Waverly American Legion, and walked in, and there was a little, the iron gates, the low stage and the iron gate across, but they have the opening in the center. They still have them every now and then. You find them. And that was the bandstand. But in the middle was this red drum set. And it was really like the white light shone down and the Hallelujah singers were, I was like, oh my God. And I was obsessed with that ever since. But I think back now and I think, you didn't know what drums were. I had no idea what drumming was. I just knew I wanted to play drums. And so it wasn't until I was probably, I want to say seventh grade, fifth or sixth grade, and we moved to California with my mother. And of course, we got there late, so I started school late in the semester, and all the drum chairs were filled. But so I started playing clarinet, which I can still play without squeaking, but I don't know, I don't play anything on it, but I still have my clarinet too. But that was, so that was it. I still wanted to play drums. And by that time, when we came back east, I got a drum pad, which was this little wooden slanted drum pad. It was very hard rubber. It may as well have been wood because it was so thin. And so I had drumsticks and I would tap on that. And my cousin, who had been a drummer in a band called the Upsetters, which is a funk band, and he was like, wow, he told my mother I had talent. He goes, I think he has potential. And so up until then, nobody bought the story that I wanted to be a drummer, I think. And so I would always look for drums. And I went to these music stores that in Elmira that were very expensive and way beyond anything I could dream of. But I went to this store that was really not a music store per se. He sold a bunch of things, but he had this blue set. And so he said, you can buy this on time. And my mother was working at the post office and she was in the window. And we went there with this installment agreement and presented it to her. And she was so embarrassed, she didn't know what to do. It was $360. And so she signed it and she had to pay $65 a month till it was paid off. And I found, doing research for this book, because I'm the archivist, I still had that receipt. I couldn't believe I was able to find it. It blew me away that I found it. But anyway, during that time, I was, I turned on American Bandstand one day, and Blue Cheer was on Dick Clark. And I went, oh, my little TV speaker was cranked, and suddenly it's rumbling. It was a little tiny black and white TV that we had. And the thing was going to explode because Blue Cheer Summertime Blues was going on, and Paul Whaley was killing the drums. And suddenly something clicked in my brain, and I went, man, that's what I wanted. That's how I want to play. And at that point, then I started breaking cymbals and sticks. And when I produced Blue Cheer, I should have presented him with a bill. Like, Paul, you owe me a lot of money, man, because I watched you, and suddenly I was racking up the bills. And but that was really it, And then, of course, finding radio. This was when I was 6 or 7. I remember the radio was always on. It was always Perry Como, or it wasn't even Frank Sinatra, because I still love Frank Sinatra. It was like the schmaltzy crap, like Perry Como kind of thing. And I hated it. But I was, I had no input. I was left alone a lot. So and it was up on the refrigerator. But one day I got up on the refrigerator and I turned the dial. And suddenly I found a station that, I'll call it a rock station, but it was playing Purple People Eater.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God, that's freaking great. And so I got money. I went and bought a 45 of the Purple People Eater.
Nice.
That was my first record. And I was able to meet him. I can't think of his name now, at New Music Seminar one time. And we sat there for a couple of days. We would meet up. And I was able to tell him about that, how influential that record was.
Wow.
There was a lot of that kind of, even 60s and 70s, rock radio was AM, well, not FM.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I mean, you think about Chantilly Lace and Purple People Eater, how close they might have been in the same key.
Mm-hmm.
Chantilly Lace, it was a one I won or one, blah, blah, blah,
Yeah, you're right.
that sort of that sort of early rock and roll shimmy was kind of a groove.
Coming out of rockabilly, really.
Yeah, exactly. And that vibe is still. I mean, AC/DC still writes songs that have that groove in it. So it's kind of interesting that so popular, and that was your first record, and it's still so. Wow, that's a great story, and I appreciate you sharing that. Because one of the parts that I was gonna make sure that you covered was, what was your first record, that you had, and there it is.
Yeah. When did so let's jump from that, you're a kid basically, and you're getting interested in in playing the drums. At what point did the Rods, as we know them, sort of coalesce, and what brought you together? How did you guys find each other?
Good question.
I had known of Elf because we used to go see Elf. And back when Elf would perform, it was high school dances, and people would dance. People were dancing all the time, standing up and dancing. You go see an Elf show at a high school, everybody was on the floor sitting and watching it. Now, they didn't run around. They didn't do anything. They just stood there and played their parts. But they were so freaking good that, you're just blown away. And Ronnie's voice has always been Ronnie's voice. One of, in my opinion, the best voice in metal, arguably one of the top two, but really the best voices in metal. And I have to say that with a caveat, because, he's in my DNA, grew up with it. And then, of course, he even sang a song that I wrote on the Brotherhood, or on the Vengeance album. But Elf was like that. So I would see those guys. And then when I played with the band Raw Meat, which was another one of the bands that I've been in that has one of the worst names. I don't know how, in the early days, Raw Meat, and that was like a great name to tell people, what band are you in? Oh, I'm in a band called Raw Meat. And that was, you didn't have bands like some of the names that later came along in the punk scene. This was when people were like the Shondells and, whatever, all the nice names. And now you're like Raw Meat. But Raw Meat practiced in a Finnish garage, which was where Doug Thaler, the guitarist in Elf, roomed with our bass player in Raw Meat, Joe Leo. So I would see those guys all the time. We'd be in the house or whatever. And so I'd see those guys. They rehearsed in the house. We rehearsed in the garage. And then I knew David because of band Colossus. I would see them. He was playing with Joey DeMeo. They would do dates, and we would be on the bill with them. And I would go see them. I went to see Thunder one time, and with my bass player in Colossus. And I've worn earplugs since early 70s. So we're sitting in the audience, pretty close to front row. And there's every kind of imaginable amp. Like, they must have borrowed everything. They must have gone to Grandma's house, see if she had any amps. They were all on stage, all turned on 10. And the hum, I took my earplugs out because they hadn't come on stage yet. I took my earplugs out and I went, holy shit. I said to my bass player, their hum is louder than we play as a band. It was so loud. And so they lit up, and my friend Dave Galoots was playing, and this is what you heard. He's killing himself. This is what you heard on the drums.
Right.
Nothing. No drums at all. You just heard the guitar and the bass.
I want to make the point that, everyone knows that drums, just acoustically, before you mic them up, are fucking loud. Drums are loud. David knows because his son plays drums in the house.
Yeah.
Everybody knows. Yeah, and they're not mic'd up through a PA system in the house.
They're loud.
They're
and the snare drum
loud.
is twice as loud as the rest of the kit.
And here's my earplugs.
Yeah, he's got them nearby.
Never far from reach.
Yeah.
So I knew David from that period of time. And then one day I was in a music store. The singer in Raw Meat, Brian Miles, he owned a music store for a period of time. And I was in the store, and Denny Dragone came in, who had been on the road with my band Colossus, and he was always on the road with those guys as well, with Joey and David. He comes in. Now, Denny and I have been roommates forever. And Denny comes in, and he comes in and he says, Mr. Feinstein and Mr. DeMeo would like to see you outside. I'm like, Denny, what? We've shared rooms forever, man. What's this formal crap? So I go out and I talk to them, and I get in the car, get in the back seat, and David and Joey are in the front. They turn around, and Joey, because I was playing with Colakis at the time, and he goes, "Do you want to play with men, or do you want to keep playing with boys?" And I went, "Oh God, yeah, boys or play with men." That's a hard decision. I want to play with men, of course. And so we started working together, and nothing came of that particular incarnation. We had a couple little demo things we did at my house, but it was freaking awesome, I have to say. But after that, that's how Joey invited me to join Man of War, and that's how David and I started the Rods. So
Wow. Yeah,
kind
Amazing.
kind of in that whole thing, it was very organic how it happened. I have a quick story about my daughter playing drums. My daughter she's a music teacher in a public school. And so she grew up her major is vocals, but she's really got a great feel like Ringo and Charlie Watts. So one summer at the lake, we have this room that's it's a very hard surfaces and a very low ceiling. And I had one of my kits set up there. So I taught her this groove, boom, ba, boom, boom, ba, boom, ba, do, 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 bee, ba, do, do, ba. She's like, "Oh, that's great." So she starts playing it. An hour and a half later, I had to apologize to everybody because I was ready to jump out the window. "Oh my God, that's making me crazy. You've put up with this for so many years. Oh my God." And she just played it for an hour and a half straight. And I was ready to just go in there and grab my drums and go, "No, done. Can't use my drums anymore."
Yeah, I totally get that. My son will be playing as soon as I get off this microphone because when we do the podcast, he knows he has to stay quiet. But as soon as I leave the room, because he knows I'm done, the ruckus starts and it goes for an hour and a half, 2 hours every single time.
Good for him. How old is he?
He's 16, and fortunately, he's really good, if I say so myself. So
he is very good.
He's really good.
Sure.
Yeah, so at least it's not just a complete cacophony, he is actually keeping a beat and playing the drums. It's just, as you know, loud.
Some of those records on the wall behind you are in his collection as well.
Yeah.
At 16 years old in 2024.
I find that young musicians have really been discovering a lot of the new music going back, and I see that. That's very cool.
Yeah.
Speaking of him, he has so many things available to him too, YouTube and whatnot, like so many techniques and doing different things that, when I was watching TV, there would be it'd be a 2-minute clip and you'd have to catch the drummer and like, "Oh, what kind of cymbals and what kind of cymbal stand is that? And how's he playing?" You'd have to glean so much information from 2-second clips.
Yeah. Now they have clinics in
endless source material at the flick of a button. Yeah,
absolutely, which is great. And that's why the level of musicianship has gone sky high, and I love that. Of course, sometimes I watch these younger kids play, and I think, I'm sure it'll be the same with your son. I go, "Oh my God, these guys just blow me away."
Yeah.
I worry sometimes, and this is just. You tell me if it's a personal opinion. I need to get off my soapbox here, but a lot of younger musicians, I'll keep it generic that way, forget how important dead space as well as pocket and groove are, and that slower is heavier than fast.
I don't think you've said anything incorrect. I do think that David and I have spoke about this. The Vinny Appice, and he didn't get credit for it the way he should have, in my opinion. He wasn't on, excuse me, he wasn't on all the reader polls as the top drummer. But when you listen to him play the slow groove with Sabbath, makes the song so heavy, and it's hard to play. People think, "Oh, it's easy." The slower you play, the more difficult it is.
I agree 100%.
But I do find that the young players will find the pocket and they learn how to do the groove, and they are playing it with amazing. You wouldn't think that because they're playing blast beats, but once they learn they reach a certain level, they start exploring the instrument and they do get into the groove and they do find different genres and different styles. and they do play with that groove. And their pocket, a lot of times, is really good. Some of the newer ones I hear, think, yeah, pocket's not so good, but a lot of them have a great pocket. So,
Yeah, I'm not calling anybody out. I'm just bringing it up topically that it's interesting. It's something that they learn later because, well, and drummers
it
just
is
like
something they learn later. That's right.
a lot of young drummers when they're attracted to the drums, they just think that they get to bang on shit, and they forget that it's mathematic and it's time, and it's what makes a good band. If your drummer is terrible, your band is fucking terrible.
Yeah, that old quote: "If the drummer ain't happening, the band ain't happening."
That's right.
Yeah.
But there is something to be said for banging on shit. Because I remember I used to practice all the time, and
Sure.
I remember one of the neighbors said, "I can always tell when you're angry because of the way you play your drums."
Wow.
Wow.
Wow. Yeah.
So you mentioned blast beats, and I'm curious your take on this as a drummer from more of the old school of heavy metal, and obviously a guy who appreciates feel and the human element. What's your take on some? I mean, is there a point where it just gets so fast it's ridiculous and it loses all the emotion and the human element for you as a drummer, or do you still find it to be impressive?
Oh, I absolutely find it to be impressive. The technique is incredible, and the fact that I didn't learn it this way, and I'm trying to incorporate some of these things, which I don't know that I don't play them live, but I do practice them. And one of the things is you learn to play everything with your feet that you can play with your hands. I think that's brilliant. When I was coming up, it was really only been recently that I'd heard that last 10 years. But when I first heard it, I thought, wow, that's amazing. Why didn't I ever think of that? There's so many things I go, hey, why didn't I think of that? But so I appreciate all of it. I do find that, and there was a comment made by a drummer that said, they asked him, what did you think of this drummer? And he said, how can you tell? Because everything is on the grid, everything is triggered. How do you know who played what? Or if it's a drum machine, it's the same, And so there's a certain element of that. Sometimes I hear a recording and I think it's so triggered, it's so beat detectived out.
No dynamic.
Why even bother playing it? Just program it. It's the same end result side by side.
Yeah.
The live drum doctored and triggered versus the drum machine or programming the drums. It's the same.
Yeah.
So, but I do appreciate it. I'm in awe of it, some of the stuff. But I had to make peace with, and I found that when we went to, it was about 15 or 16 years ago, I noticed that these young drummers who were awesome would come up to me and say, wow, I love your style. Where did you learn that? And it was such a camaraderie within the drum community. And, I was in awe of their playing, but they had total respect for what I did, which I didn't expect that to happen. But they were like, man, I love the way you play and blah, So I think it's like, they're just, I had to make peace with the fact that whatever style I have, my lick, whatever my lick is, that, it is what it is. And, playing blast beats, I have a certain option to play blast beats, but I really don't have an interest in playing blast beats the way another drummer might. So I'm totally cool with it. I'm at peace with the fact that I have a certain style and I play that, and, I'm good with it.
Yeah. Yeah. I wanted to go back to the Rhoads, let's say mid 80s. You guys did some tours with some heavy hitters. I think Maiden, Priest, Ozzy. Correct me if I'm wrong. But in those days, what to you was the most memorable tour? It was probably your first time playing the big stage in front of a large audience as direct support to some of these big name bands. Which of those tours were most memorable to you, or was there a moment in that time where you felt like it was the pinnacle?
Well, yeah, I don't know that I ever felt that way, but I do know that the first show we played, we were a replacement for, or an add-on for Blue Oyster Cult at the Broome County Arena. First time on the stage, a big stage, and we'd had one debacle opening for Judas Priest in Albany, and that was a nightmare. But we gotten past that. We had a new bass player, And so now we go on stage and we're able to perform well. And at the end of the show, I'd always seen drummers take their drumsticks and they hurl them into the crowd. Woo! And I was like, yes, I can freaking do that now. First time. So get off stage and I'm throwing my drumsticks in the crowd. And I'm like, this is the best thing ever. And I get off stage and my manager goes, don't ever do that again. That's a lawsuit. And I went, oh man, talk about dreams crushed. I was like, well, at least I did it one time. And of course I realized that, you can't just wail a drumstick into the crowd like that. But it went really far and it was really cool. And I was so thrilled. So that was a big moment for me. And now I go up and I take them like this and I go, throw them like that and hope they make it past the apron.
Right. What was the debacle with Judas Priest?
Well, we went, Doug Thaler, who had been in Elf and had gone on and he worked with ATI, but he'd gone on and became a very strong booking agent. And so we were looking for management. And he said, Cedric Kushner, who was a concert promoter at the time before he went into promoting boxing matches, he said, Cedric is going to put you on because he wants to look at you to manage. So we go to the Palace Theater in Albany and we're upstairs in the dressing room with the window that overlooks the stage. So we can look down and watch Priest when they came on. But so we're in that room and they have a tray they brought in and we were starving, remember? So at the time we had bologna, olive loaf, some kind of gelatinous mystery meat. And we're all looking at it, we're like, oh, don't touch that. That's Priest's. That's probably for Priest. We're thinking those guys wouldn't even step on that food. But for us, we're dying. And finally someone said, no, that's for you. Oh, great. So we got gelatinous meat and we were thrilled. So we go on stage and no one had told us about monitors. That first of all, you need to pay the monitor person because that's their dinner hour. So if you don't pay them to stay, they go eat. So now you have no monitors. So now we're on stage and David starts out and of course he's got the amps cranked. And this is what I hear, and pick any of the Rod songs that starts rhythmically with a guitar. And I hear this. And I'm like, the bass player and I looking at each other, where do we come in? And so we just came in. To what? I don't know. It was a nightmare. And just couldn't hear anything. And it was so loud. So after the show, Cedric Kushner told Doug that David should replace the drummer and the bass player. But it was horrible. And David just recently told him that. And he said, I never knew that. He was saying about the drummer too, because it wasn't really an option at that point, thank God. But we did replace our bass player, Steve. And, we're still sad to this day because he's such a great guy. And it was an unfair situation for him. But anyway, that was the other. But playing the first gig with Ozzy for the Blizzard of Oz, and that was really great. And we were in our dressing room, and Randy Rhoads was warming up. And we'd never heard that style of guitar playing that he was playing, like Satriani. And Steve Vai style. He was playing stuff that you didn't hear him play on the record. We never heard him play anything like that. But he must have had a Marshall half stack in his dressing room down the hall. We couldn't talk, where you could just see our mouths. We're yelling and you could just see our lips moving. But he was playing stuff we'd never heard anybody play before. So I do think Randy Rhoads, when people talk about him, I can't imagine what kind of a career he might have had he lived, because he had so much going for him. Yeah. But that was a really memorable moment. It's just hearing that kind of style that you'd never heard before and executed so well. Yeah. And of course, so loudly.
Yeah. He's my favorite.
You were a lucky fly on the wall.
Yeah.
Absolutely right.
Yeah. Did you guys, we've been mentioning, I think most people listening or watching are aware that David in your band, David Feinstein, is cousins to Ronnie James Dio, hence the reference to Elf earlier, etc. Was there ever a time when you guys toured with Dio?
Never a time. No,
How
Ronnie
did that not happen.
I think that, David left, and it's, really not my story to tell, but I can just surmise that David left Elf, and I don't think, I think it was an unexpected situation, and Elf turned, which is not David's fault, but Elf, they changed direction. They went more in a piano kind of style direction. It was not the right direction. And the records didn't catch fire. I mean, if Elf had stayed together, they might have been huge. They were a fantastic band.
Mm-hmm.
So at that point, I think Ronnie and David really weren't in touch for a long, long time. And Ronnie, certainly didn't help us in any way. But at the end, right after they did the Radio City Music Hall, they came to Cortland, and that's when Ronnie recorded "Metal Will Never Die" and "The Code," which I had written, which was a highlight of my career. And Ronnie was such a great guy, so sweet, so intelligent, and he loved his fans. The guy was the real deal.
Yeah, yeah. Let's move on to your production credits, because I'm gonna just go out on a limb here, and it's not a very long limb, but I'd say that your production credits helped define and shape what we've come to know as thrash metal. You handled the first 3 releases from Anthrax. You did Overkill. You did one of my favorite records, Exciters, Violence, and Force, Possessed. So let's start. Number one, is that something you're comfortable with, that you had a hand in shaping the future of metal, or is it something that doesn't really occur to you, or didn't occur to you until much later?
I've never been, a lot of people, and my daughter and I talk about this. We talk about, we'll meet someone and they will talk the best freaking game in the world. They'll just kill you with every kind of information, and they know it all. And we used to go, wow, I didn't even want to say anything. That guy must really, like, oh my God, must be amazing. And then you hear them and you go, that guy's barely mediocre, but boy, he can talk an expert game. So we always talk about, when we hear someone going off, we go, okay, let's see the proof in the pudding on that one. So I've never been that guy to claim credit that sometimes I should have. I'm not that guy. I'd rather let it go. If somebody wants to say something, great, but if they don't, that's cool too. So for years, I have not said anything. I haven't said anything about my connection with Upstate, having brought up so many people to Upstate, introduced them, and they went on to other bands and so on. I never did that. I never felt that was A, my place, and B, that I needed to jump in and get that credit. And, but it is true that now I do, in looking back, and people are saying it is true that, it was a changing of the guard, and people were really, my musician friends who were maybe only a couple of years older than the musicians I was producing, they didn't get it. They felt that, like one said, it's insect music. Like that, they said, well, I go, this band's going to be huge. When I was talking about Anthrax, well, how successful? I said, gold or platinum. And that was when they didn't even have a major label deal. And he's like, no way. There's no way. It's crap. And, but I got it. I got the changing of the guard, and I loved it. It wasn't even that I got it. I loved it. So my goal has always been with bands is to assess what they're doing and then try to get that energy and get it tight and get that energy transferred to the recording. And granted, we had limited budgets, sometimes inexperienced engineers, limited studios. But, we did the best we could with what we had. But the bottom line for me has always been, my focus has been getting that band direction and the band vision on recording as tight as possible, and capture that energy. So, that was my gig, and I love those bands. I still love the guys in Exciter. I love Jeff Becerra from Possessed. I mean, these guys are my friends, and some of the guys in Anthrax. I mean, I have total respect for them.
In a lot of ways, I mean, what you were doing was uncharted territory. There was no real precedent for producing that kind of music when it came out. So, and then like with Anthrax especially, you did their debut record, you did Armed and Dangerous, and you did Spreading the Disease. So you had some time with them. You got to witness the evolution. Describe that evolution of Anthrax from Fistful of Metal to spreading the disease, how did the chemistry between you as the producer and the band change, and how did the band's songwriting change, if it did at all? Just kind of walk us through, because you spent, a good bit of time with Anthrax, 3 releases.
Well, that's a good question. When Anthrax came in, I was really impressed with them. They reminded me of myself, of me, and of David when we started. They were very driven. They were very focused. They were all business. And they were very goal-oriented. And so I love that. Excuse me. I love that about them. I'm getting hiccups here. Sorry. But the dynamic was very different. They were finding their way. When we started, Scott and Danny, and I know it wasn't a popular decision at the time. I think it was a little like, people are a little noses out of joint. But it was clear to me that Scott Ian was the god on rhythm guitar. That Danny Spitz should not play rhythm guitar if we're going to make a tight record. So I had to make that call. Mm-hmm. But Danny, to his credit, is such a great lead guitarist. And so Danny and I had a great connection, and we would work, and he would do his solos, and we'd finish the solo, and he'd look at me and go, okay, just do it again. We got such a symbiotic relationship that we didn't even have to communicate after a while. But Scott was the guy. And so we basically divvied up the parts, and that was huge to the rhythmic, because Charlie and Scott, super tight together. Charlie wrote a lot of the material, still does probably, on guitar. So that was a case of that. So that first album, Dan Lilker, we played a show in Chicago with them a few years ago, maybe 5 years ago, 6 years ago. But Dan was a tall guy, comes up to me. He goes, I want to talk to you. And I'm sitting down on this low bench. I'm sitting down, and I want to talk to you. As he leans over, and I thought, oh shit, man, he's going to chew me out. Like, you bastard. I hated working with you. You were the worst. And he says to me, and he's such a soft-spoken, sweet guy. But, at first I'm thinking, oh God, here we go. And he goes, I have to thank you so much. You changed my whole playing. You told me I needed to learn to play with a pick if I'm going to play this fast music. And he goes, it totally changed everything for me. I can't thank you enough. I was like, okay, dodged a bullet. But yeah, so sweet. But anyway, so that first album, it took a long time. Neil got shorted on his time for vocals, but he still came through. And Neil and I are good friends, and I've apologized 100 times about that. But Neil is so great. He's a great singer, and I'm glad he's doing so well. He deserves it. But when they came back for Armed and Dangerous, they brought in a new singer. Now, we did pre-production, I'm trying to think where, Brooklyn maybe, Long Island. And so we get to the studio, and after about a week, now remember, Frankie is now the bass player, and Frankie was inexperienced, which he, was very nice. He's very kind. He said, that I gave him a shot and, helped him calm down. But, I tried to work with Frankie. It's very under a microscope in the studio. And when you haven't played, suddenly every little thing that you hit too hard, you're going to hear a pop on your string, or that, it's just, you're so under the microscope to get that technique, which you've been playing live, you just never really had an issue with it. But when he came back in, they had another singer. The dynamic was changing. Obviously, the shifting of the guard with Scott and Charlie really assuming control of the band. So there was a little bit of that going on. But after a week in the studio with the singer, who was a nice guy and, a good singer, went on, I think he sang with, I can't think of the name now, with Snake Sable. I'm trying to think of.
Oh, Skid Row.
Yeah, thank you, Skid Row. But so after a week, I said to the band, this guy's not going to get you to a major label. And that's what we were trying to do. That was the goal, to get them from indie Megaforce to a major label. So these guys, without missing a beat, they said, get Johnny on the phone. So I go to the conference room. I called John. I said, John, I don't think this is the singer for the band. He goes, okay, let me talk to the band. So the guys all go in. not 5 minutes later, 3 minutes later, they come back in. John wants to talk to you. I go, hey, Johnny, what's up? He goes, put him on a bus. And he hung up the phone.
Wow.
So now here I am in the studio with the band, no singer. And I got to tell this kid, bye, thank you, goodbye. And like, thanks a lot, John. But, he'd already hung up. And by that time, John and I were good friends. And, so I got it. I understood John.
This is Johnny Zazula, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Johnny Zazula, right.
Okay.
Rest in peace. Such a great guy. He and Marcia, just great people. So anyway, I started looking around, and my friend Andrew Duck McDonald, I call him, I go, Duck, Anthrax has no singer, so we need to find a singer for them. And he mentions a couple singers, and one is Joey Belladonna. So I called Joey. I asked him to come in, and he agreed. And so he comes in, and the guys in Anthrax are behind the door. There's a door that looks out on the studio, but you could kind of open it a crack and see the studio. So they're all behind that door. And so John and I are working with Joey, and he was nailing it. But again, for him, the tempo, the changes, all foreign to him. It took him a while to get it. It was, people weren't, as you mentioned before, this was a new era. This was the changing of the guard. And this was music that not a lot of people were familiar with and comfortable with. And so Joey grasped it quickly, but it didn't happen immediately. Right. But they knew right away. And within singing through, we got him through a song maybe in a half hour, and it was like they came bursting through the door, and like, that's it, he's the singer.
Do you recall what song that might have been? It was something on Armed and Dangerous, right?
It's Armed and Dangerous, and no, I don't. I have to think about what song it was.
Just the metal nerd in me just wants to know. So
yeah. No, I mean, I have to think about it, but I'm sure it'll come to me.
Pretty cool moment.
The metal nerd in me wants to know who the guy was that went on to Skid Row.
Uh-oh. I try not to talk dirt because he was young. He was partying a little bit. He was, his name was Matt Fallon. Yeah. And he's a great singer, Okay. I actually have tapes. I have recordings of Matt with Anthrax.
Wow.
So at some point, who knows, maybe they'll see the light of day. Certainly interesting for the hardcore fans.
So you did all that work with Anthrax, and then obviously there's some buzz starting to build because Among the Living was their next album, and of course that one was huge for them. And I believe Eddie Kramer did that record. So did you still have the desire to continue working with Anthrax at that point, and a label was saying, no, we got to go with somebody else, or was it just naturally time for you to kind of go focus on something else, and they went the direction they went? I'm curious to know why you didn't.
I think that's an interesting question and a fair one. I think there are a lot of reasons, and one is, remember back then Eddie Kramer was a huge name, and back then a huge name. Today it means nothing. It means nothing at all. Like, oh, it was produced by so and so. Everybody yawns, like nobody cares. Big name producer. Nobody's going to play you on radio. Nobody cares because of that. But back then, it gave you credibility. Mm-hmm. And Johnny was thrilled that he was now at a different echelon where now he's being taken seriously by the majors.
Yeah.
And so everybody wants that name producer because there's always that mystery about what producers do. So they're going to produce an album that's going to take you to the next level or make it the best album. And I think toward the end, for some reason. Now, I've been good with everybody, all the guys, but Scott and I really haven't spoken. And Scott seemed to have an issue with me. Whatever it was, I have no clue. I mean, I was paying their per diems. I have a book called The Knot Book, as Scott wrote on it. And they would sign, I would pay them out of my own pocket. Johnny didn't have money. I paid several $1,000s to keep them fed. And they would sign, after a while, they have to sign for their money, and they would sign like Mickey Mouse and, Mousy Tongue and, like crazy names after a while. But for some reason, Scott was not, just didn't care for me. I don't know. For some reason, there was no formal falling out. But I think with Scott, that's not how he works. He wouldn't confront you or try to talk it out. So whatever it's been, I've kept my mouth shut. In fact, this is the first time I've ever even mentioned that in 40 years or whatever it is. But the other guys and I are great, and so that's what it was. But sometimes I think when you work with, we had a great synergistic relationship on spreading the disease, and that's why that album resonates with the fans. I think because we were all pulling together, and we had such a good chemistry at that point. So doing another album, would it have been better? Better studio, better engineer, I say better engineer, more experienced engineer. But would it have made a better album? I don't know. Maybe Eddie Kramer made the best album. It was certainly successful, and all the machinery was in place. The machinations were there.
Yeah.
So,
well, you had a lot to do with that.
Yeah, you kind of teed it up,
I give you a lot of credit to basically helping them put Anthrax song formation and style and sound together. I mean, not you by yourself. I mean,
working with the band.
Yeah, and your communicative skills in the studio, I believe, helped them see and hear the way that Among the Living came out.
And back to, you made a point earlier, and for me, getting into it, like when I got into it, I started playing guitar about 6 months after I started playing drums. And, but I'd always had an affinity for arrangements. So it was something that every band I was in, I would always be the guy to help with arrangements and come up with ideas. And that's how I got into songwriting, by writing horrible songs, but they probably had decent arrangements. They're just horrible songs.
Right.
So
I get it.
But, for me, that was the, I was always been kind of lean toward that. And I love working with lead vocals, and I love working with guitar phrasing. And so.
Tell me a little bit about, because I'm such a fan of the album, tell me a little bit about the Violence and Force sessions with Exciter. How did that come about? What was that experience like for you? What was the chemistry like?
They are the greatest guys. I think history will show that John Ricci was not, and John just sent me an email recently, just 2 weeks ago, that he's a new band. Looking forward to hearing it. But for some reason, there was a little oil and water when it came to Dan and Al and John. John was kind of the odd man out. He had his own way of looking at things and wanting to do things. So, but as far as the session goes, it was great. They're the best guys and super talented. And Dan Beeler, man, he is awesome drummer and awesome singer, and he does both at the same time. I mean, let's get out of here, wow. He's amazing.
Yeah.
So working with them was really easy. It was a lot of fun. And they put in 100%. Al's bass tone, he showed up with the SVT. It sounded fantastic. John was not really the tightest rhythm guitarist, and so I had to really work at getting the guitar sound, because he just couldn't really double his parts the way I was hoping. It just wasn't. Some guitarists are like that. Jack Starr, great riff master, but not great at doubling his guitar parts.
Interesting.
But a phenomenal writer.
Yeah.
But I mean, and I was used to working with guitarists who were very tight and rhythmically.
Scott Ian.
Yeah.
Scott Ian.
Yeah, Scott Ian. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I've always felt like, I'm sorry to interrupt, I always felt like, this is just me, fanboy, that record, Violence and Force, I feel like part of what we're talking about here, about John's guitar playing, rhythm guitar playing specifically, had this sort of punk element to it. And I'm realizing from what your stories here, from those sessions, it just kind of dawned on me that it's not so much he meant to do that. It was kind of like his disposition inadvertently created this kind of like punk element. I mean, you think about the title track. It's very old school, like 80s hardcore, it just sounds like thrash element comes from early hardcore punk. I always thought that there was a lot of crossover, in that, that time between you could start at 81 and go all the way through like 86, where it was a style of punk that sort of lent itself to metal. And then during that interim there also, this is a tangent now, sorry.
In the
I feel
parallel
like
universe,
I feel like metalheads and punk rock scenes gelled. They started to gel. It wasn't always that, it was oil and water a lot and a bad mix. But then after a while, it started to complement, and it came into its own. Well, they called it crossover, and I feel like the thrash world was born from a lot of that. And you could go to Motorhead, you could go to Metallica, Slayer, or you could go to Anthrax, you could go to Overkill, and you could go to Exciter, and a lot of it was global. It was happening in Germany, it was happening in the UK, it was happening everywhere. And as obviously on the East Coast, with the bands that we're talking, Overkill and Anthrax, again putting you as the general of choice.
Yeah.
So I feel like, back to Violence and Force sessions and John's playing, it kind of like is something that you can press a button on and go, yeah, this is what I'm talking about with my description here. And it was just John's disposition as a guitar player that sort of helped push the element, as far as like, that's what a lot of thrash bands, whether they were better at playing rhythm guitar or not, that was like a style. It turned into a style just because of his disposition. And I think that's kind of one of those magical moments that could have been accidental, even though you were really trying hard to get it as tight as Scott Ian.
Yeah, that's a great point. And maybe that I never thought of it that way, Jason,
Yeah,
but now that you say it, what?
I say it's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, now that you say it, it makes perfect sense, because you know how much I love punk rock, and I never really thought of the guitar tones on that Exciter record being punk rock. And now that you just say that, it does kind of have that almost ragged attack, and maybe that's why I like that album so much, because of that, the elements of the music coming together the way they did.
I agree.
And one of them being punk rock. Well, it looks like we lost Carl, but we did get an hour and 20, an hour and 30 minutes with him. Lots of great stories. We covered a lot of ground. Sorry we lost him there, but he did spend some time with us and gave us a lot of great information. So on behalf of my co-host, Jason McMaster, I'm Metal Dave. Special thanks to our guest, Carl Canedy, today from the Rhoads on the Talk Louder podcast.